There's a hidden truth men rarely confess, a shadow that lingers in their thoughts well beyond the incident. It's the unsettling awareness that strikes not when he offends a harmful woman, not when he distances himself from someone fragile, but when he injures a woman who was genuinely kind to him, a woman who was present, who nurtured, empathized, safeguarded, uplifted, and cherished without expectations. And the profound dread he harbors, the one that tightens in his core during quiet hours, is this. What if the kind woman I harmed is lost eternally? What if I drove off the one individual who truly cared? Because a kind woman's quietude is unique. Her separation is unique. Her void is unique. When a kind woman retreats, the atmosphere doesn't storm. It becomes serene, and that serenity alarms him, not due to her retaliating, but because she's truly ceased attempting. A kind woman doesn't proclaim her breaking point. She doesn't warn of departure. She doesn't stage theatrical farewells. She merely halts sharing the aspects of herself he assumed were guaranteed. Her dialogues shorten, her presence diminishes, her vitality redirects inward, and the man who presumed she'd eternally pardon, eternally reappear, eternally remain, abruptly comprehends he underestimated her resilience. Kind women don't depart in fury. They depart in insight, and insight is unchangeable. Before we explore further why this dread impacts men so intensely and why forfeiting a kind woman rattles them more than they'll acknowledge, ensure you like, comment, subscribe, and activate all alerts to evolve into a resilient guardian, and solidify today's insight by posting this uplifting statement in the comments. My tranquility is my shield, because today, we're revealing the subtle reality behind what men dread most after, shattering a soul that held only sincere motives. Now let's proceed. The instant that rattles him the most is when he grasps, frequently too tardily, that kind women don't cycle back. They don't vanish for notice. They don't withdraw to control. They don't step back to challenge his devotion. A kind woman departs because she ultimately perceives the reality. Her affection is no longer met with the honor it merits, and that's the irreversible threshold. Initially, he believes she's merely wounded, that she'll settle and return as lesser women might. He presumes her gentleness implies vulnerability, that her endurance means she'll endure all, that her spirit renders her foreseeable. But then he observes something unforeseen. A change in her gaze, a composed steadiness in her voice, a fresh focus in her aura. He realizes she isn't sentimentally rattled. She's sentimentally concluded. Kind women don't retreat frequently because they don't commit casually. They devote profoundly. They endeavor earnestly. They offer more opportunities than warranted. But when their essence reaches its boundary, when their essence declares sufficiency, their withdrawal is everlasting. He might dispatch a note. He might probe the situation. He might attempt to draw her into former routines. But the woman he once recognized doesn't reply identically. Her tenderness has chilled. Her bond has faded. Her accessibility has vanished. That's when it strikes him. She's not distressed. She's completed. And that awareness bears a burden he can't dispel because he didn't merely forfeit a woman. He forfeited a woman who would have sacrificed everything for him. And that sort of forfeiture is an anguish he senses long after the event. What he dreads even more than forfeiting her is forfeiting all that accompanied her, because a kind woman doesn't merely provide affection. She provides virtue. She provides faithfulness. She provides tolerance. She provides sentimental security that wealth can't acquire and appearances can't substitute. She provides a feeling of refuge, a feeling of peace, a feeling of being authentically nurtured. When he forfeits a kind woman, he doesn't merely forfeit a companion. He forfeits a haven, and that forfeiture arrives in surges. He detects at the initial occasion something falters in his existence, and she's no longer the one he can contact. He detects it when another offers him focus. But the link seems superficial, coerced or exchange-based. He detects it when he encounters women who are aloof, erratic, egoistic, or preoccupied. Women who offer the minimal effort. While she once delivered the utmost of herself without prompting, virtue is a scarce asset in this realm, and he only appreciates its worth when it's absent. He recalls how she attended, how she comforted him during self-doubt, how she evoked joy on shattered days, how she introduced balance amid turmoil. He recalls how effortless it was to confide in her, how innate it felt to rely on her, how secure he felt near her, and abruptly, he comprehends the extent of his loss. He didn't merely forfeit a kind woman. He forfeited access to virtue itself, the very virtue he once thought would persist eternally. And that awareness doesn't dissipate. It persists, it throbs, it lingers, because inwardly, He knows another woman might fill her role, but none will replicate her essence. What men dread most after injuring a kind woman is not her wrath. It's her quietude, because a kind woman's quietude is never indirectly hostile. Never scheming, never a ploy. It's conclusive. It signifies she has nothing remaining to offer, nothing remaining to strive for, nothing remaining to clarify. And that alarms him in a manner that outbursts never could. A woman screaming is still sentimentally engaged. A woman debating is still seeking comprehension. A woman clarifying herself still desires mending. But a woman who becomes hushed, who ceases responding, who retreats into herself, with composure and insight, that's a woman who has embraced the result. That's a woman whose essence has sealed independently, not from malice but from self-worth. And that's the quietude he dreads most because he knows he provoked it. This quietude is substantial. It's authentic. It's unalterable. It's the type that arrives without a timer, without alerts, without "we'll discuss" later. It's a quietude that embeds in his world like a veil, gentle, obscure, and irrefutable. He examines his device more frequently. He revisits dialogues mentally. He convinces himself she's merely occupied, though he senses the reality profoundly. He experiences the lack of her goodnight messages, her reliable companionship, her foreseeable gentleness, and each moment that elapses without her communication affirms his gravest dread. She was sincere when she departed, because when a kind woman becomes silent, she isn't penalizing him. She's safeguarding herself, and he knows, whether he voices it or not, that quietude is the one injury he can't mend, the one gap he can't bridge, and the one repercussion he never anticipated her to impose. There is an instant, a subdued, crushing instant when he gazes at her and realizes her eyes lack the former tenderness they held. Her tone lacks the former mildness. Her companionship feels alien now, and that instant impacts him more severely than anything. The instant he witnesses her disengage sentimentally, because sentimental disengagement from a kind woman isn't theatrical. It's not boisterous. It's not retaliatory. It's nuanced yet evident. She doesn't contend. She doesn't justify herself. She doesn't attempt to repair the fracture. She simply ceases contributing, ceases extending, ceases providing the sentimental profundity he once immersed in, and he senses that alteration instantly. Even when she utters nothing, his instinct detects what his arrogance attempts to reject. The kind woman he once undervalued is fading away softly, and there's nothing he can do to halt it. This disengagement is what alarms him most, because it isn't fleeting. It isn't a stage. It isn't an examination. It's metamorphosis. A kind woman's sentimental retreat is the outcome of suffering transforming into insight. It's the juncture where her essence ceases anticipating and commences recovering. It's where her affection ceases emanating outward and reverts inward. And when he observes this alteration, this gradual, consistent erosion of the connection he once depended on, alarm embeds. Not the sort that incites disorder, but the sort that resides in his core like a load he can't displace. He recalls how profoundly she nurtured. He recalls how secure he felt. He recalls the sentimental assurance she supplied. And as he observes her disengage, he grasps the harsh reality. Once a kind woman's essence turns frigid, it seldom reheats for the individual who chilled it. That's the dread that trails him long after she's departed. One of the profoundest dreads a man harbors after injuring a kind woman is the dread of substitution, because he knows that when a kind woman ultimately disengages, she doesn't remain solitary for extended. And it's not because she's needy. It's because her worth is indisputable. Her gentleness, her reliability, her profundity, her sentimental wisdom. These are qualities other men detect immediately. Qualities other men value instantly. Qualities he once received effortlessly, but others would treasure wholeheartedly. And that alarms him, not because he assumes she'll leap into something fresh promptly, but because he knows intuitively that once she bestows her affection on another, it will be superior this time, more robust, more wholesome, more valued, more esteemed. He knows another man will receive the variant of her he undervalued, and that reality scorches in a manner he can't vocalize publicly. He envisions her beaming differently, conversing differently, treating another man with the same delicacy he rejected. He envisions another man experiencing her tolerance, her faithfulness, her mildness, her steadiness. And that's where his dread becomes overpowering, because he knows a kind woman doesn't replicate her errors. She advances. She acquires knowledge. She selects more judiciously next time. He doesn't merely dread her cherishing someone else. He dreads her cherishing someone else superiorly, He dreads witnessing her mended in ways she couldn't mend with him. He dreads observing her bestow another man the variant of herself that he never imagined he'd forfeit. And the heart-wrenching reality he attempts to disregard is this. Once a kind woman acknowledges her value, she becomes the kind of woman every man desires. Except the one who forfeited her. That dread remains with him long after she's departed. After the turmoil subsides, after the quietude extends, after the actuality of her void embeds, something else infiltrates his thoughts. Something weightier than remorse. Something keener than sorrow. Obligation. Liability. The reality he evaded now confronts him without cushion, without justification, without diversion. When a kind woman departs, when her vitality vanishes, when her gentleness is no longer accessible upon request, he ultimately must confront his own contribution to forfeiting her, and that is an anguish few men are equipped to face, because as long as she lingered, still nurturing, still aspiring, he could narrate a soothing tale to himself that he didn't truly injure her, that she'd recover, that she'd eternally return. But when she departs definitively, that narrative crumbles. He begins reliving the instances he ignored her, the phrases he shouldn't have uttered, the disdain he overlooked, the endeavor he didn't reciprocate. For the first time, he views his behaviors without the security of her absolution, and with that insight arrives the sort of liability that pricks. He grasps he was cherished, unconditionally, by a woman who requested minimal and contributed abundantly. He grasps he confused her endurance for inactivity, her gentleness for frailty, her reliability for dependency. He grasps he misinterpreted the worth of a soul that was untainted, stable and devoted. And now that she's absent, he must dwell with the uneasy reality. He forfeited her due to his decisions, not hers. That degree of liability is what lingers with him. It compels him to confront tendencies he has evaded in every bond prior to her. It uncovers the sentimental immaturity he concealed behind assurance. It discloses the aspect of him that undermines what is virtuous because he never recovered from what is fractured. And he comprehends, agonizingly, mutely, that forfeiting a kind woman wasn't destiny. It was his own action. That awareness is the sort of reality that imprints a scar. What men dread most, after injuring a kind woman, isn't always forfeiting her in the instant. It's the extended shadow that ensues thereafter. Because forfeiting a kind woman imprints a scar on his standing, not in a rumor context, but in a ethereal, sentimental, and mental context. He bears the awareness with him discreetly, confidentially, that he permitted something exceptional to escape. And every fresh woman he encounters, every fresh link he pursues, every fresh bond he attempts to forge reminds him of what he possessed and how he mismanaged it. He begins to perceive the disparity between the women he meets and the woman he forfeited. He observes how other women don't attend identically. They don't nurture identically. They don't dedicate identically. They lack the profundity, the tolerance, the sentimental wisdom she possessed. And while he may never articulate it publicly, his essence murmurs it. I botched something authentic. This awareness trails him into the future. It tints his anticipations. It molds his selections. It becomes a subdued throb he bears because every occasion a woman disappoints him. Every occasion someone handles him nonchalantly. Every occasion he faces apathy or disdain. He's reminded of the one woman who didn't. And this becomes his inner standing. The man who destroyed it with a truly kind woman. That designation isn't verbalized, but it resides within him. It's mirrored in his remorse, in his contrasts, in his nightmares, in his hopes for another opportunity he knows won't arrive. Because once a kind woman departs, once she advances, once she becomes inaccessible sentimentally, mentally, and ethereally, he is compelled to exist with a reality that weighs more than any separation. He became the antagonist in the narrative of the one woman who would have offered him the universe, and that is a standing burden he bears long after she's departed. One of the profoundest dreads a man experiences after injuring a kind woman is observing her flourish, observing her advance into a variant of herself he never envisioned, a variant he never witnessed, a variant he will never again access. Because when a kind woman is injured, she doesn't remain shattered. She reconstructs. She rediscovers her merit. She invests in her form, her mission, her regimen, her goals. She ascends from the suffering with purpose. And when she elevates, she doesn't merely recover. She metamorphoses. Her assurance hones. Her limits fortify. Her criteria rise. Her vitality transitions from contributing excessively to contributing solely to those who merit it. And he observes all of it, Perhaps not intimately, perhaps not via direct interaction, but through the separation he once demanded. He observes the advancement. He senses the ascension. He detects the radiance and it alarms him. Not because he's envious of her advancement, but because he grasps her advancement, underscores everything he forfeited. He observes other men detecting her, men who acknowledged the worth he disregarded. He observes her becoming more joyful without him, more robust without him, more balanced without him. He observes her becoming the woman he always desired her to be, but now it's occurring for someone else, for a future she's no longer including him in. And that's the dread that strikes the deepest. The dread that his behaviors didn't merely drive her away, they propelled her into becoming the optimal variant of herself after she was absent. He didn't merely forfeit her. He forfeited the woman she became, the woman she should have been with him, but wasn't permitted to be. That flourishing becomes a muted echo resounding through his mind. She became the woman I always required right after I shattered her, and that is a dread he bears discreetly, persistently, and eternally. And now we arrive at the reality that penetrates every stratum of this narrative. The reality men dread most after injuring a kind woman. Not that she's furious. Not that she despises him. Not that she seeks retribution. But that she recovers without him. That she discovers herself. That she becomes more robust, more judicious, more serene. That she uncovers a existence where his companionship is no longer required, no longer yearned, no longer part of her horizon. Because when a kind woman ultimately seals the episode, she does it with a degree of tranquility that feels unchangeable. She doesn't glance backward. She doesn't reopen entrances. She doesn't fracture her own essence, attempting to revise what already concluded. A kind woman progresses forward with elegance, and that elegance becomes the one element he can never negotiate with. That's what he dreads most. The unyielding reality that he forfeited the sort of woman who doesn't appear twice in a lifetime. And if this insight resonated with you, if it evoked your merit, if it assisted you recall the sort of essence you possess, then ensure to like, comment, and subscribe, and activate all alerts to become a superior value individual. And solidify today's teaching by posting this concluding statement in the comments. Forfeiting me is the teaching. Thank you for engaging, friend. Remain anchored, remain regimented, and never remorse departing from someone who didn't respect the virtue you offered so generously.